A mail-order bride arrived in Arizona to marry a man she'd never met. But when she got there, the man was gone, and in his place stood an Apache warrior, holding the deed to her new life, and a secret that could get them both killed. The stagecoach wheels threw red dust like blood against the setting sun. When they finally stopped in Cedar Ridge, Arizona, Karen Sullivan felt her heart trying to hammer its way out of her chest. This was it, the end of a desperate journey and the beginning of a new life, or so she hoped. At 19, she left everything behind in Philadelphia. A dead-end job, a tiny room, an unwanted suitor with hands like cold fish. The advertisement in the paper had felt like a lifeline. A rancher named Thomas Hartwell, seeking a wife, a woman of good character, willing to embrace the frontier. She was willing. She was desperate. But Thomas Hartwell wasn't there to meet her. Instead, a man stood in the shadows of the depot. He was tall, built like the mountains that loomed over the town, with shoulders broad enough to carry the weight of the world. His black hair was braided with silver ornaments. His face was sharp, intelligent, and weathered by a sun she was just beginning to understand. He was an Apache warrior, and he was the most intimidating man she had ever seen. He stepped forward. "You are Karen Sullivan." It wasn't a question. Karen's mouth went dry. "Yes, I'm looking for Thomas Hartwell." The man's dark eyes seemed to see right through her. "Thomas Hartwell is gone." Gone! The word was a punch to the gut. She had spent every last cent she had to get here. There was no going back. "Gone where?" "That is the question," the warrior said, his voice a low rumble. "He is dead. Fever took him 3 weeks ago." Dead. The world tilted on its axis. Her carefully constructed future had just turned to smoke and dust. "You have nowhere to go," he stated. And again, it wasn't a question. Karen lifted her chin, clinging to the last shreds of her pride. "I'll manage." But as she looked at the rough, unwelcoming town, at the saloon doors spilling out loud, drunken laughter, she knew it was a lie. She was alone, penniless, and 1,000 miles from anything she knew. This was not a safe place for a woman. The warrior seemed to read her thoughts. "Thomas owned a small ranch. He left papers." "Papers?" "The deed. It is yours now." Karen stared at him, stunned. Her own land, her own home. It seemed too good to be true. "And what do you want in return?" she asked, suspicion narrowing her eyes. For the first time, a flicker of something like amusement crossed his face. "You learn fast. That is good. You will need that here." He didn't answer her question. He just turned and led her down the dusty street, leaving her no choice but to follow. The next morning, he took her to the ranch. It was a small adobe house nestled in a grove of cottonwood trees, simple, sturdy, and beautiful. On the kitchen table was a letter, Thomas Hartwell's final words. He wrote of his dream for the ranch, his hopes for a family, and he wrote one final chilling instruction. "Trust Naiche. He is the most honorable man I know. The deed is in both your names. You will need each other to hold this land." Karen dropped the letter. Her hands were shaking. The deed wasn't just in her name, it was in his too. She wasn't the owner. She was a partner, an unwilling partner, shackled to a stranger, an Apache warrior who was now the only thing standing between her and utter ruin. And she had the terrible feeling he knew far more about Thomas Hartwell's death than he was letting on. The weeks that followed were a blur of hard work and tense silence. Nietzsche was a patient teacher, showing her the rhythms of the land, how to mend a fence, how to find water, how to read the sky for signs of rain. He never entered the house after dark. He slept in the barn. He kept a respectful distance. But Karen saw the way the townspeople looked at them when she rode in for supplies. The whispers, the glares, a white woman living on a ranch with an Apache man. It was a scandal, a fuse slowly burning. One day the fuse was lit. A man named Peaton arrived, dressed in a fine Eastern suit, flanked by a cavalry officer, Lieutenant Colonel Hayes. "Miss Sullivan," Peaton said, his smile all teeth, "I represent the Territorial Land Development Company. The railroad is coming through. We're prepared to make you a generous offer for this land." "It's not for sale," Karen said, her hand instinctively going to the rifle that now leaned always by her door. Hayes stepped forward. There's also the matter of the Apache you're harboring. All Apaches are required to be on the reservation. It's the law. The threat was clear. Sell the ranch or they would take Naiche. You should take their offer, Naiche said that night, his face a grim mask in the firelight. I have lived as a fugitive before. And go where? Karen's voice cracked. This is our home now. He left it to both of us. Why, Karen? Naiche asked, his dark eyes searching hers. Why did he do that? The question hung between them, the one she had been too afraid to ask. Because he knew they were coming, a new voice said from the doorway. Maria Santos, the kindly store owner, stood there, her face etched with fear. She held a small leather-bound journal. I found this hidden in his things at my store, Maria whispered. Thomas was a good man. He was my friend. He knew what Peyton was planning. It's all in here. Karen took the journal. Thomas Hartwell's neat script filled the pages. He wrote of Peyton's railroad, of the illegal surveys, of the threats. He wrote of the valley's precious water rights, rights that were tied to this specific piece of land. Peyton didn't just want the ranch, he wanted to control the water for the entire territory. And then she saw the last entry. Peyton's men came today. They know I won't sell. I fear my fever will take a sudden turn for the worse. I have made Naiche my partner. He swore an oath on his honor to protect this land and the woman who is coming to share it. He is the only one I trust to fight for what is right. It wasn't a fever, it was murder. And Naiche wasn't just a friend helping out. He was a guardian, bound by a sacred promise to a dead man, a promise to protect her. The next morning they came back. Peyton, Hayes, and a dozen armed men. They weren't here to make an offer. They were here to take the ranch. Time's up, Hayes said, his hand on his pistol. Karen looked at Naiche. She saw the grim resolve in his eyes. He would fight. He would die to keep his promise. And she would die with him. Unless... An idea, insane and reckless, sparked in her mind. An idea born of desperation and a deep, growing feeling she had refused to name until now. She stepped onto the porch, her voice ringing out across the dusty yard. Sheriff Morrison, I want you to witness a legal proceeding. The sheriff, who had come with the posse, looked confused. Karen turned to Naiche. Her voice did not shake. Naiche of the Chiricahua Apache, will you take me as your wife? A stunned silence fell over the yard. Peyton's jaw dropped. Hayes looked apoplectic. Naiche stared at her, his dark eyes wide with shock. Then a slow, fierce joy spread across his face. Yes, he said, his voice a thunderous vow. I will. Sheriff, Karen said, her eyes blazing, I am giving this land to my husband. According to territorial law, a married Apache man with property rights cannot be forcibly relocated. She had turned their own law against them. She had declared war, and she had just married a man she was falling desperately in love with, right in front of the men who wanted them both dead. The victory was sweet, but short-lived. They had won the battle, but Peyton and Hayes were not men who accepted defeat. The railroad was a relentless beast, and it would not be stopped by a piece of paper and an unconventional marriage. The whispers in town turned to open hostility. Supplies became harder to buy. Men who had once tipped their hats now spat in the dust when Karen rode by. She was the woman who had married a savage, a traitor to her race. But on the ranch, a different world was taking shape. The awkward distance between Karen and Naiche dissolved, replaced by the easy intimacy of a shared fight. They worked side by side, their hands often brushing as they repaired the barn or tended the garden. At night, they sat on the porch, not as partners in a legal arrangement, but as two people building a life. He taught her about his people, his beliefs, the deep connection to the land, the spirits in the rocks and the river. She told him about Philadelphia, about the clatter of streetcars and the suffocating weight of a world that judged a woman only by who she married. My people say a heart must choose its own path, Naiche said one evening, watching the stars appear. My heart has, Karen whispered, and the words were a truth so powerful it frightened her. The first real attack came a month later, not from Peyton, but from the land itself. A flash flood, a wall of brown water that tore through the valley, wiping out their garden, threatening the house itself. They worked for hours in the driving rain, building a desperate barricade of rocks and logs. At one point, the current swept Karen off her feet. She was pulled under, the water a roaring chaos. Then strong arms were around her, pulling her from the flood. Nietzsche held her close, his body a shield against the storm. "I have you," he said, his voice rough with an emotion he could no longer hide. That night, soaked and exhausted, they didn't retreat to their separate spaces. The flood had washed away the last of their boundaries. In the warm glow of the firelight, he touched the silver ornaments in his hair. "My mother gave me these," he said. "She said they would guide me to my spirit's home." His hand came up to trace the line of her jaw. "I think they have." Their first kiss was not gentle. It was a collision of two worlds, of pent-up longing and shared desperation. It was a promise made in the heart of a storm, but their newfound happiness was a fragile thing. A week later, a writer from the reservation came with urgent news. Nietzsche's younger sister was sick, the white man's sickness. The medicine man could do nothing. She was dying. Nietzsche was torn. His duty was to his people, but his promise, his heart, was with Karen. "You must go," Karen said, her own heart breaking at the thought of him leaving. "She is your family." "You are my family now," he said, his eyes filled with a pain she understood all too well. But he went. He rode out at dawn, promising to return as soon as he could. Karen was alone again, and she knew, with a cold certainty, that Peyton and Hayes would see this as their chance. She didn't have to wait long. 2 days after Nietzsche left, the cavalry rode into her yard. But it wasn't just Hayes. It was a dozen soldiers. "Karen Sullivan," Hayes said, a triumphant smirk on his face. "You are under arrest." "For what?" she demanded, her rifle in her hands. "For conspiring with a hostile. Your husband, Nietzsche, and his band of renegades attacked a supply wagon 2 nights ago. 3 soldiers are dead." It was a lie, a blatant, impossible lie. Nietzsche had been here, with her. "That's not true," she cried. "He was here. I'm his alibi." Hayes laughed. "The word of an Indian lover against 3 dead soldiers? I don't like your chances." They dragged her from her home, leaving the door to swing open in the wind. As they tied her hands and forced her onto a horse, she saw Peyton watching from the ridge, his face a mask of victory. They were taking her to Fort Apache, to a military tribunal, a trial she knew she could not win. They had taken her home, they had taken her freedom, and they had just sentenced the man she loved to death. The military stockade at Fort Apache was a pit of sun-baked despair. Karen was thrown into a small windowless cell, the heat suffocating, the air thick with the smell of fear. Her trial, if you could call it that, was a farce. She was a traitor, an Apache sympathizer. Her testimony that Nietzsche had been with her was dismissed as the ravings of a corrupted woman. They didn't want the truth. They wanted a scapegoat. She was sentenced to hang in 2 weeks, a public example. Days blurred into a nightmare of heat and hopelessness. She thought of Nietzsche, wondered if he knew what had happened. She prayed he was safe, that he wouldn't try something foolish. On the 10th day, a new prisoner was thrown into the cell next to hers. An old Apache woman, her face a roadmap of wrinkles, her eyes holding a wisdom that seemed ancient. "You are the white woman who married Nietzsche," the old woman said, her voice like dry leaves rustling. "I am," Karen whispered. "He is coming for you." Karen's heart leaped, then sank. "No, he can't. They'll kill him." "A man does what he must for his heart's home," the old woman said simply. "But he does not come alone." The attack came at dusk, just as the bugle was sounding the end of the day. It was not a wild charge. It was a precise, coordinated assault. Warriors appeared on the rooftops, their arrows silent and deadly. Others created a diversion at the main gate, drawing the soldiers away. And then he was there, at her cell door. Nietzsche. His face was painted for war, his eyes burning with a cold fire. He was not the gentle teacher she knew. He was a warrior, a leader. He broke the lock with a single blow from a stolen cavalry axe. "Come," he said, his voice a low command. He pulled her into the chaos of the burning fort. They ran through smoke-filled streets, past fallen soldiers and warriors. At the stables their horses were waiting, Maria Santos, the store owner, was there, holding the reins. "Go, my children," Maria said, pressing a bag of supplies into Karen's hands. "I told them you were at my store that night. They did not listen, but some of us, we know the truth." They rode out of the fort into the desert, leaving the flames and the fighting behind. They rode hard, not stopping until the glow of the fire was just a faint smudge on the horizon. They made camp in a hidden canyon. Nietzsche tended to a shallow cut on her arm, his touch gentle once more. "How did you know?" she asked. "Maria sent a rider. She is a brave woman." "Your sister?" He shook his head, a shadow passing over his face. "She walks with the spirits now." Karen's heart ached for him. "Nietzsche, I'm so sorry." "Do not be sorry," he said, his voice soft but firm. "She is at peace, but there will be no peace for us now. We are fugitives. The army will hunt us." "Where will we go?" "Mexico. There are others there. Free Apache. We can make a new life." He looked at her, his eyes asking the question he wouldn't speak. "Where you go, I go," she said, leaving no room for doubt. "We are a family." He pulled her close, his arms a circle of strength around her. "Yes," he whispered into her hair. "We are." As they sat by the small fire, the vast starry desert stretching around them, Karen knew their journey was far from over. They were outlaws, hunted, with a price on their heads, but they were together, and they were free. And for the first time, Karen Sullivan Hartwell Nietzsche understood what Thomas Hartwell had meant in his letter. The West rewards courage, and she had finally found hers. They traveled for weeks, moving by night, hiding by day. The desert, once a place of beauty and discovery, was now an enemy, every shadow a potential threat. Nietzsche taught her the art of survival, how to leave no trace, how to find food where there seemed to be none, how to listen to the whispers of the wind. But the army was relentless. They were led by a scout who knew the land almost as well as Nietzsche did. Several times they narrowly escaped capture, leaving their pursuers with nothing but cooling embers and fading tracks. One night, as they rested in a cave high in the Dragoon Mountains, Nietzsche confessed his deepest fear. "They will not stop," he said, staring into the darkness. "And I have led you into this." "I chose this," Karen corrected him fiercely. "I chose you." He turned to her, his face etched with a pain that was more than just fatigue. "Before my sister died, she made me promise something. She made me promise to protect our people's history, our stories, our songs." He pulled a leather pouch from his saddlebag. Inside were several small, carved wooden figures and a bundle of painted sticks. "These are the stories of the Chiricahua. They were passed to me by my grandfather. If they are lost, a part of our soul is lost." Karen looked at the precious objects, understanding the weight of the burden he carried. He wasn't just fighting for his own life. He was fighting for the memory of his entire people. "They will not be lost," she said, taking his hand. It was 2 days later that the army finally cornered them. They were trapped in a box canyon, the only way out blocked by a dozen soldiers. Hayes was with them, his face triumphant. "It's over, Nietzsche," he shouted. "Surrender, and the woman lives." Nietzsche looked at Karen. He saw the fear in her eyes, but also the same unbreakable resolve he had seen the day she married him. He had one arrow left. He could take Hayes with him. It would be a good death. "No," Karen whispered, reading his thoughts. "We live. Together." She reached into her saddlebag and pulled out Thomas Hartwell's journal. "Colonel Hayes," she called out, her voice clear and strong, "I have something you might want to see." She held up the journal. "This is the true story of your railroad, Mr. Petton. The story of murder and bribery. A copy is already on its way to a journalist in Washington, but the original is right here." Peyton, who was with the soldiers, went pale. Hayes looked uncertain. "Let us go," Karen said, her voice ringing with authority. "And this journal disappears. You get your railroad. We get our lives. A fair trade, I think." It was a bluff, a desperate, wild gamble. There was no copy on its way to Washington. But they didn't know that. Hayes and Peyton exchanged a look. Their whole corrupt enterprise was balanced on a knife's edge. "How do we know we can trust you?" Hayes called back. "You don't," Karen said. "Just as I don't know if you'll shoot us in the back as we ride away. But it seems we are all out of better options." For a long, tense moment, no one moved. Then slowly, Hayes gestured for his men to lower their rifles. Nige and Karen turned their horses and rode slowly out of the canyon. Every muscle in Karen's back was screaming, expecting the feel of a bullet. But no shot came. They rode until the sun set, until they were sure they were not being followed. They had won. They had traded a lie for their lives. Years later, they built a home in the mountains of Sonora, Mexico, a place of peace where their children were born. Children with Karen's green eyes and Nietzsche's black hair. They ranched, they farmed, and they kept the stories alive. Nietzsche would carve the figures, and Karen, with her Eastern education, would write the words down, preserving the history of a people the world was trying to forget. Their home became a sanctuary for others, a place where the lines between worlds blurred, where Apache, Mexican, and even the occasional lost American could find a moment of peace. One evening, as they sat on their porch, watching their children play, Karen touched the silver ornaments in Nisha's hair. "Your mother was right," she said. "They guided you home." Nisha took her hand. "We built this home," he said, "together." And in that small corner of the world, a mail-order bride from Philadelphia and an Apache warrior proved that love wasn't about finding a safe harbor. It was about having the courage to build one, even in the heart of a storm. What did you think of Karen's incredible journey? From a desperate mail-order bride to a fearless woman who defied an entire army for the man she loved. Let me know in the comments below what you would have done in her situation. Stories like this remind us that the greatest strength often comes from the most unexpected places. If you believe in the power of love to cross any border and overcome any obstacle, please hit that subscribe button. It means the world to us and helps us keep bringing these incredible stories of the Old West to you. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next adventure.